Hello and welcome to the Eorzean Journal and my breakdown of the main scenario quests of Final Fantasy XIV. In this episode, we will cover the 26 or so quests that span levels 15 to 20, which includes the first couple of dungeons and trials of the game, not to mention our first formal introduction to the Scions, who we will become intimately familiar with through the story. All of this spans over 3 hours of gameplay, which you can find unabridged at the link in the description or the card that's popping up just about now. When we last left off, we had just paid a visit to Gridania and ul'dah as official representatives of Limsa Lominsa and Admiral Merlwyb, sharing her plans to hold a memorial service to those who gave their lives during the calamity of Bahamut 5 years ago. An event that marked the end of the 6th Astral Era and the previous incarnation of the game. Once leaving the last of the meetings, we are approached by a guard that informs us that Badaron of the Drowned Wench, a man we are already quite familiar with, is on the lookout for capable adventurers. We return to Limsa and speak with our friend, learning that there's been an increase in kidnappings and that a strange ship has been sighted off the coast of Aleport. We're sent off to investigate, stopping only briefly by the Hall of the Novice to learn the ins and outs of our role in combat. The local Yellow Jackets inform us that the Serpent Reavers, a gang of pirates closely tied to the Sahagin, are suspected to have made their base of operations in the natural grottos of Sastasha. Before we venture inside, we encounter a group of adventurers looking to do the same. Led by a hewer named Aver, we witness him, an Eorzea named Lali-ho, and a Lalafell named Pyoreo mock the healer of their party, Edda, for being slow and unskilled. And this is a sign of the internal strife that might happen in a party where trust doesn't come easy. Soon enough, we find 3 other adventurers to team up with, and we head into the grotto to hunt down these Serpent Reavers. At first, we encounter little signs of pirate activity, but after we make our way through a hidden door and a guardian quarrel, it becomes clear that the extensive caverns have been repurposed into the headquarters of these servants of Leviathan, built upon the port said to have been constructed by Mistbeard himself. Inside the caves, we find many of the kidnapped women who have been kept as prisoners and slaves, the pirates having forced themselves on them. Enraged by these heinous deeds, we track down Captain Madison, the leader of the Serpent Reavers, who doesn't prove much of a challenge to our righteous fury. But as we corner him by the water's edge, we witness how the actual leader of the operation, Den the Orca-Toothed, a massive Sahagin warrior, strikes the man down for his failures before he turns to his next targets, our party. After having cleared out the major threats of the grottos, we inform the Yellow Jackets of what we found and move back to the Drowned Wench, disturbed by the wicked deeds we had just witnessed, but emboldened by our success and the lives we have saved. But as we return, we witness another group of adventurers, led by a towering Rogadin named Dolores Bear, who bemoan the fact that the request they sought to handle had already been handled by us. Still, there's no bad blood between us, and they head out for other jobs, and we are debriefed by Badaron representing the Adventurers Guild. He informs us that the guild in Gridania likewise are on the lookout for capable adventurers to tackle some local troubles, and he sends us off. Mayun, the guild representative in the Forest City, informs us that there have been sightings of the cult known as the Lambs of Dalamud in the old burial grounds of Tam-Tara Deepcroft. This cult is said to have worshipped the lesser moon known as Dalamud, the one that contained the elder primal Bahamut, and which was brought down by the Garleans 5 years ago, and they are now trying to find a way to avenge their fallen god and bring it back to life. Once more, we venture inside, and as was suspected, the cult has made their home among the ancient crypts and tombs. Mixed in with the local wildlife are resurrected thralls and cultists who throw themselves against us. But we prevail and put a stop to the evil spirit possessing the corpse of Galvanth the Dominator, returning triumphant to the guild. Mayun is thankful, but points us at another party of adventurers who have been similarly tasked with clearing out the Deepcroft. We recognize Edda, the healer of the group, being admonished by 2 of her party members for having seemingly failed to keep the leader of their group, Aver, alive. a costly lesson that shows that without proper preparation and skills, death can and will come quickly and mercilessly to even the most hardened adventurers. Miu next sends us to ul'dah, where her colleague Momodi, the proprietor of the quicksand, is looking for steady sword hands. The matter that needs to be resolved is an urgent one. The mining concern Amagina and Sons had their eyes set on reopening the Copperbell Mines, once thought dried of ore, but in so doing they accidentally unleashed an army of giants from their underground prison. These, it would turn out, had been enslaved by the Thorns, the stewards of ul'dah who had brought the city to prosperity before returning rulership to the Old Dynasty, and they were thirsting for vengeance over these injustices. For once, Dolorous Bear and his party had arrived before us, descending into the mines to earn the glory they so sought. But in a tragic twist of fate, as we arrive at the mine, we are met with the news that they were all of them slain by the giants, the party unprepared for what was waiting for them ahead, and thus we are reminded once again of the danger of our chosen profession. Up until now, we have been lucky and teamed up with skilled adventurers, and the tragic fates of Aver, Dolorous Bear, Emefana, and Kikina could have been ours, but for the grace of the 12. We steel ourselves and enter the mines, descending deeper and using old explosive powder to go further and access much older, natural caves where ancient creatures roam. Finally, we bring down the leader of these giants, Gyges the Great, and the uprising is stopped. Choosing not to dwell on the implications of what we have just done, we return to Momodi and Painted Mesa, the miner who first informed us of the events in Copperbell. Yet our conversation is cut short as we hear the cry for help from a woman being harassed by some ne'er-do-wells. We step in to protect her, earning the enmity of the leaders of the ruffians before they leave. And then suddenly Y'shtola, the woman we met in Lanosia, shows up and tells us that she has been keeping track of our activities. She lets us know that the organization that she is part of, the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, could have some use of our talent. Before we can ask for more information, she departs, and we find ourselves wondering whether we should take her up on the offer. Thankfully, Momodi is more than happy to tell us what she knows about the Scions, and it turns out that they make it their mission to safeguard Eorzea from the many threats that she faces. It would seem their goals align with ours, and we are far from the only adventure they have sought out to help them. Thus we journey to the nearby Vesper Bay and the Waking Sands, an unassuming building where Tataru, a singing, cheerful Lalafell lass, greets us. She points us to the cellar entrance and lets us know that the antecedent is waiting for us. This antecedent is Lady Minfilia, the leader of the Scions, and she welcomes us with open arms alongside the other members of the Order, Y'shtola being one of them. Minfilia briefs us on the mission of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, an organization founded without political affiliations with the express purpose of defending Eorzea from what threatens her. The most dire and immediate one being the primals, deities of the beast tribes who are made manifest through prayer and the collected ether of elemental crystals. Bahamut was one such primal, as is Leviathan, to whom the serpent reavers were sworn. Minfilia explains that the visions we have experienced during our adventuring are in fact signs of a power we have been granted called the Echo. It allows us to witness past events of those we meet and to speak with and understand anyone we encounter as if we spoke the same language. She, too, possesses this rare gift, and while she hasn't told us everything about it yet, her knowing what we have experienced lends some credence to her words. But of course, she doesn't expect us to help out of the kindness of our heart, and so she also offers us the use of retainers, a system of employment where we can have others help manage our finances and storage. Even if you decide never to pursue the careers of a disciple of the hand or the land, I can promise you that the seemingly massive inventory space the game grants us from the get-go will fill up with all manners of odds and ends before we even reach level 50, so make sure to drop by the retainer vocate near one of the market boards in any of the 3 starting cities. And make sure to like and subscribe too if, you want to. Don't gotta do it if you don't wanna, but would be kinda nice. I'd appreciated. And showing you the same kindness as you show me, Minfilia gives you the password of the Order, Wild Rose, which, if you're familiar with Final Fantasy games, is a key word of the Resistance in Final Fantasy II. Before you give her your final answer, you have the opportunity to speak to other members of the Scions, including the Scholars of Shallan, the leading members and non-natives who come from the neutral city of Shallan, a collective of scholars and researchers who swear off politics in order to observe the world outside their own without interference. Yet these Scions have sworn off the neutrality, and thus you are introduced to Papalymo, Ul'dah, Thancred, and Urianger, as well as Y'shtola, who you of course are already familiar with. This group is also called the Archons. The Archons travel around Eorzea and monitor the activities of the tribes to spot signs of primal summonings. There are dark forces at work, the Ascians whom we encountered in Aleport, and these too are being investigated by the group. There is a brief mention of their previous leader, who was lost at the Battle of Cartino, none other than the Archon Louis, whom we have heard of in our visions of the battle not long ago. And with all this in our mind, we agreed to help the Scions and join them in their task of protecting Eorzea, and gladdened by this, Minfilia sets us to our first task. Thancred, who is the Archon in charge of monitoring Amalj'aa activities in Thanalan, briefs us on the disappearance of several refugees from outside the city walls of ul'dah, and that this has coincided with the robbery of crystal transports in the area as well. Crystals, of course, along with human sacrifice, are required to summon a primal, hinting that the Amalj'aa may be trying to bring their primal Ifrit into our realm. Before we set off to Camp Drybone in eastern Thanalan, we speak with some of the members of the Scions, new recruits who, like us, were skeptical of the organization before they realized its purpose. A Mikoti Seeker of the Sun named Abatia, an Eorzea named Auli, and an Alamigan Huer named Ironbald. It would seem that they too have the gift of the Echo. At Drybone, we meet with Isambard, the de facto leader of the encampment, who is expecting you after receiving a letter from Minfilia. Isambard informs us that pilgrims to the local church of Saint Adama Landama have been murdered on their way to the camp by the Amalj'aa. Since the people of the camp fear for their safety, it is up to us to retrieve the bodies, and as we find them they are laid to rest in the grounds of the church, their lives paid back for with blood. Yet this vicious cycle is sure to continue as blood pays for blood, and Isambard wonders aloud who might be helping the Amalj'aa with the kidnappings, as there have not been reports of increasing raids, the Beast Tribe's preferred way of capturing victims. At least not to match the number of missing people. Isambard points us in the direction of a merchant who might know more, but this man, Ungust, happens to be the same one we faced before in ul'dah, the man who was assaulting the woman on the streets. Ungust, drunk and uncooperative, tells us to speak with the locals, but none of them provide anything of use, and stumped we turn instead to the church and its clergy. There, a robed man named Marquis requests that we aid in the burial of an unfortunate soul before he points us to Sister Eorzean, who might know more. Eorzean sadly does not, and we return once more to Drybone, where Thancred lets us know his suspicions. He believes that Sister Eorzean may be the one responsible for the disappearances. Yet Isambard refuses this, and, after saving her from undead warriors that attacked her while she was trying to find a child's missing treasure, we're not so sure either. Thancred urges us to investigate a nearby Amalj'aa encampment, where we stumble upon a flyer tricking poor people to pursue work under the church. Yet Eorzean decries this impersonation and the mockery it makes of its teachings. Indeed, it would seem someone has stolen priestly garments and has set out to trick unwitting refugees to meet, most likely in order to subdue them in an isolated location. Thancred suggests that we dress up as poor travelers and bring attention to our desperation in order to fool the kidnapper into approaching us. The plan works, and we end up meeting the false priest at the pond north of Sandgate. It turns out to be Ungust himself. He has been aiding the Amalj'aa in the abductions, and getting fine coin out of it too, but he quickly folds the pressure and reveals his heinous deeds. Thancred sends us back to Minfilia with this information, and along the way, we learn of the Halatali dungeons, formerly a holy place to the first Lalafels of Eorzea. It would later lay abandoned for centuries until the Pugilists Guild turned it into training grounds. Yet as the calamity struck, the caves were abandoned, leaving some fiendish creatures inside still alive and threatening to burst forth and wreak havoc on Thanalan. Dealing with this issue with little problem, and together with some other adventurers, we then returned to the Waking Sands. Minfilia fears that we will face the Amalj'aa threat sooner rather than later, and urges us to prepare accordingly. She sends us to a small encampment where a goblin named Mutamix has discovered many means of extracting from and melding materia to gear in order to imbue them with power. There we learn how our efforts and natural ethers serve to imbue our items with some of our purpose, which can then be extracted into spheres of materia. With this new knowledge fresh in mind, we are asked by Minfilia to aid the Immortal Flames, the Grand Company of ul'dah, in setting a trap for the Amalj'aa. Angus, the false priest we caught, will be the bait to draw them out of hiding. Yet this turns out to be a trap for us instead, as Angus reveals the presence of multiple traitors within the ranks of the Immortal Flames. Even though we put up a brave fight, it is not enough to fend off the many beastmen who attack us, and thus we are made prisoners, sacrifices ready for Ifrit, the Amalj'aa's primal, and the Lord of the Inferno. Yet all hope is not lost, and we manage to escape the clutches of the Amalj'aa long enough to find allies to stack the odds more in our favor. And as we return to face Ifrit and our captors, we witness how the primal's powers affect the minds of the other prisoners, tempering their souls and making them willing servants of Ifrit's desires. Yet this power is fruitless against us, and stealing our resolve, we take arms against the godlike being, managing to defeat and banish it after a long and difficult fight. Miraculously, we withstand the Lord of the Inferno and his servants, and as the primal falls, dissipating into the ether from whence it came, reinforcement arrives and we are saved, the remaining Amalj'aa forced to flee or die at the hands of the Immortal Flames. We return to the Waking Sands, where Thancred and Minfilia praise our effort, but our victory sours in our mouth as we learn what will happen to the Tempered. There is no known cure for the primal's affliction of the mind, and thus those we fought side by side with will be executed in order to ensure that Ifrit may not be aided in his return by them. Indeed, the primals cannot truly die as long as there are those who will worship them. Given enough prayers and crystals, they can be brought back again and again, and barring genocide of entire species, there is no surefire way to prevent the inevitable summoning, unless these tribes have no reason to resort to this drastic measure to begin with. It seems a lost cause then, as the city-states of Eorzea are far from achieving any lasting peace with the beast tribes, nor do they seem inclined to, as many influential factions fan the flames of war with the primal worshippers. Dwelling on these heavy matters, we are taken by surprise when Minfilia brings our attention to another matter that requires our action. It would seem that the grand companies of the three city-states, the Order of the Twin Adder, the Immortal Flames, and the Maelstrom, all have their eyes set on recruiting us to their numbers. While Minfilia would rather we devote our attention to the cause of the Scions, she admits that being a member of a grand company comes with quite a few privileges, one of them being a chocobo of your own. But before you make your decisions, she suggests you visit each of the three remembrance services. The Elder Seedseer, the Flame General, and the Admiral. These leaders of the grand companies will be holding speeches eschewing the values of their respective city-states, which might help tip the scales in their favor in your choice. Yet before we depart, Minfilia gives us a link pearl, a form of communication which will keep us in touch even across great distances. And then, in turn, we visit Gridania, ul'dah, and Limsa Lominsa to attend the ceremonies. If you want to watch them in their entirety, there will be a card in the upper corner linking to the unedited footage. But since your choice of Grand Company is an important one, it's good to know, or revisit, where your city-state of choice lies in their values and creeds. During these ceremonies, we meet once more the Allison twins who journeyed with us to Limsa Lominsa. They seem to know much and more about what happened at Cartineo 5 years ago, and they likewise seem disappointed that the true sacrifices of that event have been all but forgotten. They are Alfinod and Alice, and despite their youth, they seem to be tasked with a great deal of responsibility. Alfinod, the brother, seems more inclined to speak with us, and he reasons that these ceremonies are more aimed to embolden the people in preparation for the upcoming conflicts with the Garlean Empire, a threat ever looming on the horizon. It makes sense, after all. The Eorzean alliance suffered massive losses at the Battle of Cartano, as did the 7th Legion, yet the threat of invasion is far from over, and now the 14th Legion, led by Gaius von Balsar, have begun preparations for the upcoming conflict. After the ceremonies, it is time for you to decide which Grand Company to join, and barely do you have time to offer up your services before news reach you about a crashed airship being hunted by Garlean forces. As you find it, you discover the pilots to be 2 engineers of the Garland Iron Works, a company owned by the world-famous Sid Garland, a defector from Garlemald and a genius engineer who has been missing since the Calamity. You aid in saving the 2 engineers from the Garleans and see to them coming under protection by the Scions of the 7th Dawn, who were allies of Sid's and who too are looking for the man. Once you are sworn into your Grand Company, they issue you with a chocobo and present various ways you can serve your city-state. For now, you have no standing orders and are thus able to return to the Waking Sands where, once again, you meet Biggs and Wedge, as well as Minfilia. There is no rest for you, as Minfilia urges you to travel to the Shroud, the woodlands outside of Gridania, to investigate the Sylphs there. This beast tribe worships the primal Ramu, the Lord of Lightning, and while the Sylphs have had their cordial relationships with the Gridanians, it is feared that they too may be convinced by an outside force to summon their primal. Unlike the Ixal, bird-like beastmen who aggressively fight back against Gridania, the Sylphs prefer to keep to themselves, so the first job is to figure out how to find them. At the recommendation of Commander Huloy of the Twin Adders, you travel to the Hawthorn Hut to attend a crash course in Sylphic culture. There, a man named Amelane points you towards Rolf Hawthorn, the patriarch of his family and head beekeeper, who has a long history of trading with the small beastfolk. Yet Rolf is old and somewhat short of memory, but thankfully he has regaled many members of his family with his stories, and they will in turn teach you some basics on how to approach the Sylphs. He does, however, teach us what to gift the Sylphs as a means of introduction, and armed with this knowledge, we set out to do just that. And there we will stop for now. In only a few short days, we have taken the steps from being a relatively unremarkable adventurer into becoming a member of the heroic Scions of the 7th Dawn. We have made powerful allies and enemies, and we are starting to understand the greater threats against this fragile peace that the land is currently experiencing. We would like to thank the antediluvian Bambi Parsons, a leader with an unbreakable will, and the Methuselah Socrates Johnson, a scholar and masterful craftsman of stories. We would also like to thank the Primogen Council of Alexander Kishtaria, Nicolae Marius Vorculescu, and Procyon. We raise our cups in a toast to the elder bled for their support. And thank you for watching, Warrior of Light. May the light of Hydaelyn ever shine your way.